Seoul's most feared mafia boss was dying in a garden, and every single man around him, armed, trained, loyal for years, couldn't do a thing about it. Not because they were cowards, because they literally could not touch him. Hong Ji-yong had built his empire on one principle: nobody gets close unless he allows it. Turns out someone used that same principle to kill him. The ring on his finger had been flashing red for 40 seconds. 40 seconds. And not one of his 12 guards had moved an inch toward him. See, here's what most people don't know, and this is actually rooted in real weapons engineering. There's a class of bioweapons designers called affiliation-sensitive delivery systems. The concept is simple and terrifying. A device engineered to identify resistance and escalate. The moment anyone connected to Ji-yong's world had tried to remove that ring, and one man did try about 30 seconds earlier, the ring discharged. The lieutenant lost 2 fingers before he hit the ground. After that, every man in that garden took 3 steps back. The ring wasn't just killing Ji-yong, it was making sure no one who knew him could stop it. He was slumped against a concrete planter, his platinum hair soaked through with sweat. His tailored navy suit jacket twisted around him like something that used to mean power, and now just meant weight. Like his white shirt had been torn open, either by the fall or by the lieutenant who tried to help and couldn't, and you could see the tattoos. All of them, serpents coiling across his chest, black florals wrapped around his fingers, the ink of a man who'd spent his whole life making the world understand he was untouchable. He was shaking. His own guards stood in a semicircle around him, guns drawn, not at a threat, at him. They were waiting for the 60-second window to close. Not waiting for the toxin dose to complete and become irreversible. Waiting to make sure the job got finished. This wasn't a rescue operation. It was a viewing. That's when Mary Richardson came around the corner. Gray sweatshirt, gray sweatpants, box braids pulled over one shoulder, earbuds in, completely, totally, embarrassingly unprepared for what she was walking into. She saw the guards first, then Ji-yong, then the ring, still flashing, now cycling faster. And here's the thing about Mary that you need to understand immediately. She wasn't brave in the way people romanticize bravery. She wasn't fearless. She was just annoyingly, stubbornly, constitutionally unable to watch someone die when she could see a way to stop it. She didn't pull out her phone, didn't freeze, didn't do the completely reasonable thing, which would have been to turn around and pretend she'd taken a wrong turn. She looked at the ring. She looked at the guards, who hadn't moved toward her yet, because nothing in their orders covered a random civilian in athleisure appearing out of nowhere. She had maybe 4 seconds of confusion working in her favor. She used them. Mary dropped to her knees on the cold stone, reached into her jacket pocket, and pulled out a ceramic-coated utility blade, the kind she carried for work, the kind with 0 metal conductivity. And in one clean, focused motion, she cut through the titanium band. The ring hit the stone. Ji-yong's body lurched, one violent, agonizing breath, the kind that sounds less like relief and more like a man being dragged back from somewhere he was already almost gone. Alive, but barely. Because here's what Mary didn't know yet, what she couldn't have known. The 60 seconds wasn't the full story. It never was. The ring was just the delivery mechanism. The toxin already in his bloodstream, that was still there. Still moving, still working. She hadn't saved him. She'd bought him a window. And the moment the guards registered what just happened, that a civilian had walked into their controlled execution and disrupted it, every weapon in that garden swung toward her. Ji-yong could barely lift his head. His hands were trembling, the tattooed fingers curling weakly against the stone. He was going to be useless for a long time. Mary was the one holding the blade now, and she was the one who knew every back tunnel, every utility corridor, every forgotten exit in this neighborhood, because when you're a woman living alone next to a building full of men who scare the whole city, you learn the escape routes. She grabbed his arm. "Can you walk?" He looked at her like the question itself was an insult. She looked back at him like his pride could wait. 60%, he managed. "Good enough. Move." And that right there, that moment, is where this story really begins. Not when the ring activated. Not when the guards turned traitor. But when a woman who had every reason to walk away decided, for reasons even she couldn't fully explain yet, that 60% was worth betting her life on. Here's what I want you to sit with before we go any further. There's actually a documented psychological concept behind what Mary did. Researchers call it bystander inversion. The standard bystander effect says the more people present, the less likely anyone is to help. Oh, but studies show that when everyone else is visibly choosing not to act, one person stepping forward breaks the freeze for the whole group. Mary didn't act because she was special. She acted because she was the only one there with nothing to lose, and that made her the most dangerous person in that garden. Sometimes the most powerful person in the room isn't the one with the most weapons. It's the one with the least to protect. Now, I need you to be honest with me in the comments. If you had turned that corner instead of Mary, if you'd seen 12 armed men standing around someone dying and realized you were the only one who could stop it, would you have kept walking? Most people would, and I'm not judging that. But if even part of you thinks you would have dropped to your knees like she did, subscribe right now and tell me below, what would have made you stop? What would have made you walk? I'll be in the comments. I read every single one. Let's get into this story. Mary didn't think. She just moved. That's actually the thing about high-stress decision-making that most people get wrong. They assume the people who act fast in a crisis are fearless. They're not. The brain under extreme threat literally suppresses the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for overthinking, and pushes the basal ganglia into the driver's seat. Pure instinct, pure motor memory. Mary wasn't brave in that moment. Her brain had just temporarily shut off the part of her that knew how scared she was supposed to be. She grabbed Ji Yong's arm, yanked it over her shoulder, and pulled. He was heavy, like embarrassingly, inconveniently heavy for someone she was trying to save quietly. All that muscle, all that dead weight, and the man had the nerve to grunt like she was the one causing him pain. "You're going the wrong way," he rasped. "I'm not. The exit they're covering is that way. I'm not going that way. So unless you want to lay back down and finish dying, I need you to use your legs." He used his legs. The utility corridor behind the complex's east wall wasn't on any public map. Mary knew about it because 3 months after she'd moved in, her radiator had burst at 2 in the morning and the maintenance guy, this older Korean man named Mr. Baek, who smelled like cigarettes and always had paint on his shoes, had walked her through the building's entire underground infrastructure so she'd never be helpless again. She'd thought that was sweet at the time. Slightly weird, but sweet. Right now, she wanted to find Mr. Baek and hug him. She pushed through the narrow access door behind the garden's stone wall, half dragging Ji Yong into the dark. The door swung shut behind them. Above ground, she could hear the guards shouting, of footsteps scattering, someone barking orders in Korean too fast for her to catch all of it. They didn't know about the tunnels. She knew about the tunnels. For the first time in the last 63 seconds, Mary Richardson had the advantage. The utility corridor connected to a decommissioned maintenance line that ran under 3 city blocks and fed into the lower platform of Mapo Station's abandoned South Annex, a section the city had sealed off during a 2019 renovation and never reopened. Mary had found it 8 months ago on a very specific kind of bored Saturday that she didn't like to talk about. She'd thought it was just a weird urban exploration find. Turns out it was a safe house she didn't know she was building. Ji-young made it through the tunnel mostly on his own. Mostly. There were 2 moments where his knees buckled and she caught him, and both times he said nothing. Which, honestly, told her more about how bad the poison was than anything else could have. A man like that doesn't accept help quietly unless he genuinely has no other option. They dropped down onto the old platform, and Mary pulled a small flashlight from her jacket. Yes, she also just had a flashlight. She was that kind of person. And swept it across the space. Concrete, dust, old signage, a row of broken benches, no people. Good enough. She lowered Ji-young onto the least destroyed bench she could find and immediately started assessing him the way she'd been doing in her head since the garden. His breathing was labored but rhythmic. His pupils were uneven, left slightly larger than right, which meant the neurotoxin had already started affecting his nervous system before she'd cut the ring. His hands were trembling with a fine, persistent shake that had nothing to do with cold. "Do you have any allergies?" He stared at her. "Medical allergies. To anything?" "No." "Good." She unzipped the small pack she wore under her sweatshirt. Look, she went on early morning walks alone in a city where her neighbor turned out to be a crime boss. Okay, she'd been prepared for something, and pulled out a basic trauma kit. Nothing dramatic. Compression wrap, antiseptic, 2 types of pain reliever, and electrolyte packet. Ji-young watched her work with an expression she couldn't fully read. Not gratitude. Not suspicion, exactly. Something more like recalibration. Like a man who'd spent so long being the most powerful person in every room he entered that he genuinely didn't have a framework for what was currently happening to him. Here's the thing about neurotoxin withdrawal that the movies always skip, and this is actually documented in clinical toxicology literature. When a fast-acting nerve agent is interrupted mid-delivery, the body doesn't just return to normal. The partial dose that already entered the system creates something called autonomic rebound. The nervous system swings violently between overstimulation and shutdown. Sweating, then chills, heart racing, then dropping, extreme nausea, muscle spasms. It's not just uncomfortable. For someone with Ji-young's physical conditioning, it would feel like his own body declaring war on itself. The first spasm hit him about 11 minutes after they sat down. He grabbed the edge of the bench. Didn't make a sound, which was honestly more unsettling than if he'd yelled. Hey, look at me." Mary moved in front of him, grabbed his face with both hands, tilted it up. "Eyes on me. Don't fight it. If you tense up, it gets worse. I know that goes against every instinct you have, but I need you to breathe through it. Okay?" His jaw was clenched so hard she could see the muscle working. "Ji-young." He looked at her. "Breathe." He breathed. The spasm passed after about 40 seconds. He sat there afterward, just still, collecting himself, and then very quietly, without looking at her, "How do you know how to do this?" "Nursing program. 2 years. Didn't finish." "Why not?" She didn't answer that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. She handed him the electrolyte packet instead. "Drink this. All of it." He drank it. Didn't argue. And that, right there, was the moment the power dynamic in that underground station became completely, undeniably clear. Hong Ji-young, the man who ran the most feared criminal organization in the city, was sitting in an abandoned subway platform drinking an electrolyte packet, because a woman in gray sweats told him to. She held all the cards, and they both knew it. About 40 minutes in, Ji-young's hands had steadied enough for him to reach into what remained of his jacket's inner lining and pull out a phone. Slim, matte black, the kind that didn't look like anything but probably cost more than Mary's rent. "Who are you calling?" "Kwon, my head of security. He's been with me 12 years. He wasn't in the garden, he was on a different rotation. If anyone's clean, it's him." Mary looked at him for a long moment. "You sure? I told you. 12 years. Yeah, and, the guys who just tried to watch you die? How long had they been with you?" Ji-young paused, just slightly. Then he dialed. Kwon picked up on the second ring. The conversation was in Korean, fast and clipped, and Mary only caught pieces of it. Garden, ring, tunnel, where are you? But she watched Ji-young's face while he talked. That was enough. She watched the exact moment it changed. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a gasp or a flinch. It was just a stillness that moved through him like something shutting down behind his eyes. He stopped talking mid-sentence, listened for about 4 seconds. Then he ended the call. He sat there holding the phone. Ji-young. Silence. Hey, what did he say?" When he looked up, his expression had rearranged itself into something flat and controlled that Mary suspected he'd spent years building. A face for receiving information that destroyed you without letting anyone see it land. "The order for the ring," he said very evenly. "It didn't come from a rival. It didn't come from a federal agency. It came from inside." Mary sat back. "Kwon told you that?" Kwon confirmed it. "Because Kwon is the one who placed the order." The silence in that station was the kind that has weight to it. "The man you just called. The man I just called. Who you said was clean. Who I said was clean." Ji-young set the phone down on the bench very carefully. "He didn't know I was still alive. He was surprised. He covered it well, but not well enough. And here's something that hits different when you actually understand it. There's a concept in organized crime studies called coup latency. It's the idea that in any criminal hierarchy, the most dangerous betrayal is never the one that comes from outside. It's the one that's been quietly building on the inside, waiting for the exact right moment of vulnerability. Ji-young's organization hadn't been infiltrated. It had grown a betrayal from within. I nurtured it and timed it to the second. The most fortified empires in history have fallen the same way, every single time. Ji-young knew this. Mary could see it on his face, not just shock, but the particular kind of devastation that comes from realizing that the threat wasn't a stranger. It was someone who'd sat across from you at dinner, someone who'd stood beside you. "How many people knew your schedule for this morning?" Mary asked. 12. "And how many of those 12 were in that garden?" He was quiet for a moment. 8. "So 4 people didn't show up to watch you die." She met his eyes. "That's where we start." They moved 2 hours later. Ji-young had a secondary location. Not a safe house in the traditional sense, more like a clean property held under a shell company so buried in corporate layers that not even his lieutenants knew it existed. Or so he'd thought. He'd told exactly one person about it. Years ago, during a conversation he'd considered private. Mary didn't ask who, not yet. Getting there meant surface streets, which meant exposure, which meant Ji-young needed to look less like a man who'd recently survived a biometric assassination attempt. They did what they could. He rebuttoned his shirt. She gave him her jacket. It was tight across the shoulders and looked absolutely insane, but it covered the tattoos on his hands well enough. and they walked 3 blocks to a side street where Ji Yong apparently had a nondescript gray sedan registered under a name that didn't exist. The property was a narrow 4-story building in a quieter district. Ground floor looked commercial, vacant. Upper floors were residential, also vacant. Ji Yong got the door open with a code. And they stepped into a space that was clean, stocked, and had clearly been set up by someone who understood that emergencies don't schedule themselves. Water, non-perishable food, a medical kit that made Mary's trauma pack look like a toy, 2 sets of clean clothes in various sizes, a laptop, encrypted, a burner phone still in its packaging. Mary actually exhaled for the first time since the garden. "Okay," she said. "Okay, this is—" The window on the north wall lit up orange, not sunrise. The wrong direction for sunrise. The wrong color for sunrise. They both turned at the same time. The building across the alley was on fire. No. Wait. This building was on fire. The smell hit a half-second later. Accelerant. Strong, chemical, not accidental. Mary had grown up near enough to a neighborhood where this happened on purpose that she recognized it instantly. That sharp, almost sweet synthetic smell underneath the smoke that meant someone had planned this. "Go," Ji Yong said. "The laptop." "Leave it go." They went. The back stairwell was already filling with smoke from below. Whoever had done this had started at the base, which meant they knew the layout, which meant Ji Yong's clean property wasn't as clean as he'd believed. Mary pulled her sweatshirt collar up over her nose, grabbed the burner phone off the counter as they passed, and followed Ji Yong through a window onto a fire escape that groaned under their weight in a way that genuinely concerned her. They hit the alley at a run. Behind them, the building's second-floor windows blew out in a wave of heat that Mary felt on the back of her neck like a slap. She didn't look back. You know that thing people always do in movies where they run from an explosion and then dramatically look back at it? No. No cap. Mary Richardson ran with her head down and her eyes forward, and she did not look back even once because she had seen enough movies to know that was how people tripped. They cleared the alley, turned 2 corners, stopped in a recessed doorway and stood there catching their breath. Ji Yong was shaking again. Not the poison this time. She could tell the difference now. Just adrenaline on top of an already compromised system. She could see the effort it was taking him to stay controlled. "They tracked us there," he said. "Yeah. Which means they have more resources than I—" "Yeah, Mary." She was already on the burner phone, already dialing. "See, I know someone," she said. Okay, look, she's a little chaotic, and she lives in what I can only describe as a server room with a cot in it. But she is genuinely the smartest person I've ever met, and if anyone can trace where that ring's tech came from, it's her." Ji Yong stared at the phone in her hand. "You're calling a civilian." "I am a civilian. You're welcome, by the way." He didn't have an answer for that. The phone rang 3 times. 4. Then, "Mary? Girl, it is— do you know what time it is? Danny, I need you. Right now, no questions, just— Are you home?" A pause. Then Danny's voice shifted, picking up on something in Mary's tone the way only a real friend can. "Yeah, I'm home. Come now." Danny's apartment, if you could call it that, was a converted basement unit in Yongsan that smelled like instant ramen and circuit boards and had approximately 14 monitors running at any given time. She was 26, Korean-American, 5'2", and operated with the chaotic, focused energy of someone who'd been awake for 30 hours and had somehow made that her baseline personality. She took one look at Ji Yong in the doorway and said, completely flatly, "Is that Hong Ji Yong?" "It's a long story," Mary said. "Is he dying in my house?" "He's not dying, It's complicated." Mary, Danny. Y'all better sit down and tell me everything. They sat down and told her everything, or most of it. Ji Young sat in the corner with his arms crossed and let Mary do the talking, which was probably wise because Danny kept shooting him the kind of look that made it clear she had very strong opinions about the organized crime industry and its impact on local communities. When Mary got to the ring, Danny leaned forward. You still have it? Mary reached into her pocket and set it on the table. Danny pulled on a pair of nitrile gloves. She just had those, apparently, which Mary chose not to question, and picked it up, turned it over, brought it close to the light. This isn't off the shelf, she said, mostly to herself. This is... Okay, so the outer casing is titanium composite, but the delivery mechanism inside, that's custom. Like someone built this specifically. This isn't something you order. Someone engineered this from scratch. Can you trace it? Mary asked. Give me a few hours. We might not have a few hours. Then give me the few hours I need and go be tense somewhere else. Mary looked at Ji Young. Ji Young looked at the monitors. Neither of them argued. They were running on no sleep, no food, and borrowed time, and the only thing standing between them and whoever had just firebombed a building to kill them was a 26-year-old in a basement with 14 screens. But here's the thing, and this is actually something researchers who study crisis survival talk about. Why the most effective survival units aren't the ones with the most resources. They're the ones that trust the right people fast. Mary and Ji Young had found Danny. Danny was already working. That was enough. For now. Mary woke up on Danny's couch to the sound of silence. Not comfortable silence. The wrong kind. The kind where something that was making noise has suddenly stopped. The monitors were still running. The ramen smell was still there. Ji Young was asleep in the chair across the room. Which, honestly, was kind of remarkable given everything, but also made sense because his body had been through a trauma that would have put most people in a hospital. But Danny's chair was empty. Mary sat up. Danny? Nothing. She checked the bathroom. The small back room where Danny kept her server equipment. The narrow kitchen. Empty, empty, empty. She went back to the main room and looked at the monitors. 14 screens, all still running. Data still pulling, processes still running. Which meant Danny hadn't shut anything down before she left. Danny always shut things down before she left. She had a whole routine about it. Mary had witnessed it. It took like 5 minutes and Danny narrated the whole thing like she was tucking the computers in for a nap. Mary picked up the burner phone, dialed Danny's number. It rang, and rang, and rang. And then from somewhere just outside the apartment door, muffled, distant, but unmistakable, she heard it. Danny's ringtone. It playing in the hallway, with nobody answering it. Mary stood very still for about 3 seconds. Then she crossed the room, grabbed Ji Young's shoulder, and shook him hard. Hey, wake up! We have a problem! He was awake before the sentence finished, the way people who've spent years in dangerous situations learn to sleep, always one layer away from alert. His eyes focused immediately. What? Mary looked at the empty chair, then at the door. She's gone. And just like that, the rules of the game changed again. Because up until this moment, the threat had been coming for Ji Young, his organization, his betrayers, his ring, his poison, his empire falling apart around him. But now someone had taken Danny. Danny, who'd had nothing to do with any of this 24 hours ago. Danny, who'd been pulled into this because Mary had made a phone call. Danny, who was currently somewhere unknown because Mary Richardson had been constitutionally unable to let a man die in a garden. The savior complex that had started all of this had now put someone else in danger. And that was the moment Mary stopped being an accidental participant in this story. That was the moment it became personal. It happened gradually, and then all at once. My Ji-young had been moving slower than he wanted to for the past several hours. And Mary had watched him fight that, watched him push against the limitations of a body that was still burning through residual toxin like a car running on fumes. He'd been functional, aware, but not himself, not fully. The moment his system cleared, she felt it before she saw it. He stood up from the chair differently. Not the careful, measured way he'd been moving since the garden, testing each motion before committing to it. This was just standing up, clean, immediate, like a switch had been thrown somewhere deep in his nervous system and everything came back online at once. He rolled his neck, flexed both hands, looked down at them. Then he looked up at Mary with an expression she hadn't seen on him yet. "It's gone," he said. "The shaking? All of it." And honestly, Mary felt two things at the exact same time. Relief, because a healthier Ji-young meant better odds of finding Danny, and something else, something quieter. Because up until this moment, she'd been the one running things. She'd been the one with the tunnels and the trauma kit and the contacts and the plan. Ji-young had been, for the first time in probably his entire adult life, completely dependent on another person. That dynamic was about to shift, and they both knew it. Here's something that's actually studied in survival psychology. Researchers call it resource rebalancing. In any partnership formed under crisis, leadership naturally migrates toward whoever holds the most relevant skills for the current threat. Mary had held it when the threat was medical and navigational, but the threat had just changed. It was no longer about tunnels and electrolyte packets. Someone had taken Danny. That meant armed people, organized people who moved quickly and left no witnesses. That was Ji-young's language, not Mary's. She handed him the lead without a word. He took it without making it a thing. And in that small, wordless exchange was more mutual respect than most people build in years. They didn't have long to strategize. Danny's monitors had been running a background trace on the ring's internal components when she disappeared, and one of the screens had quietly finished its process and was displaying results that neither of them had seen yet. Ji-young spotted it first, a map overlay with a location pin 3 kilometers away. A warehouse district, industrial, the kind of place that shows up in 0 tourist guides and 100 crime reports. "That's where they took her," Mary said. "Probably." "Not probably, that's where they took her." Ji-young didn't argue. He was already moving, checking the space for anything useful, the way someone moves when their operational brain has fully re-engaged. He found a locked cabinet behind Danny's server rack, looked at it for approximately 2 seconds, then looked at Mary. "Does she keep tools in there?" Yeah, I think so. Why do you—" He opened it. Not with a key, just opened it. Mary decided not to ask. Inside, a taser, zip ties, 2 utility knives, a portable signal jammer, and a first aid kit that suggested Danny had been quietly preparing for chaos her entire life, which honestly tracked. Ji-young armed himself with the efficiency of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. Mary took one of the utility knives and the jammer without being asked. They were out the door in under 4 minutes. The hit squad found them 2 blocks from the warehouse. 4 men, dark clothing. No visible insignia, but the way they moved. Staggered formation, covering angles. She's communicating with hand signals. Was professional in a way that regular street muscle just isn't. These weren't enforcers. These were operators. Ji-young stepped in front of Mary without discussion. What happened in the next 90 seconds was something Mary would spend a long time trying to process afterward. It wasn't like the movies. It wasn't clean or choreographed or cool. It was fast and brutal and deeply uncomfortable to watch because Ji-young didn't fight like someone performing. He fought like someone solving a problem. Each movement was the minimum required, no excess, no hesitation. By the time it was over, all 4 men were down and Ji-young was standing there with a split across his left knuckle and absolutely no expression on his face. He turned back to Mary. "You good?" She stared at him. "Mary." Yeah, I'm good." "Stay close." She stayed close. The warehouse was exactly what it looked like from outside. Large, industrial, the kind of building that echoes. They went in through a loading dock entrance that Ji-young bypassed with unsettling ease and found Danny on the 2nd level, zip-tied to a chair in front of her own laptop, which someone had apparently forced her to bring, which meant they'd needed her skills and grabbed her to use them. Danny looked up when they came through the door, took in Ji-young's split knuckle and Mary's expression, and said very calmly, "I found something. Before they grabbed me. I didn't tell them, but... Mary, I found something and you need to see it." Mary crossed the room and cut the zip ties. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine, Mary, look at the screen." Mary looked at the screen, and the bottom dropped out of her world. The ring's internal engineering signature, the specific construction method, the biometric calibration system, the way the delivery mechanism was built, it all traced back to a single development file. Patent pending research. Is submitted under a private LLC. The LLC was registered to a man named David Richardson, her brother. Mary hadn't spoken to David in 4 years. He was brilliant, like genuinely, frustratingly, distractingly brilliant, the kind of smart that made every room he walked into feel slightly smaller. He'd gone into biotech research after college, chasing contracts, always needing money for the next project and the next one after that. The last time they'd spoken, she'd told him she was done watching him sell his talent to people who didn't deserve it. He'd told her she didn't understand how the world worked. She'd thought he meant corporations. She hadn't thought he meant this. "He sold it to the syndicate," Danny said quietly. "About 18 months ago. The design, the production specs, everything. And based on what's in this file, this ring isn't the only one. There are at least 6 more of these things out there, already distributed." Mary didn't say anything for a long moment. Ji-young was standing behind her. She could feel him deciding whether to speak. He didn't. He just waited. And here's the thing about that, about what he chose to do in that moment. There's actually a concept in conflict resolution called strategic silence, the deliberate choice to not fill space with words when someone is processing something devastating. It's rarer than it sounds, especially from people who are used to being in control of every room they enter. Ji-young choosing silence in that moment was quietly one of the most decent things he'd done since the garden. Mary closed her eyes, opened them, looked at the screen one more time. Then she pulled out the burner phone. "We're not done," she said. "There are 6 more rings. We need to destroy the production data and get the antidote. Where's the server?" Danny pointed at the ceiling. "3rd level. There's a main terminal up there. If we wipe it and destroy the physical hardware, the weapon specs are gone, but Mary..." The warehouse door on the ground level opened. They all heard it. There were 3 of them, and one of them was on a phone call as he walked in, which meant someone had already told him where to find them, which meant the operation was bigger and more coordinated than any of them had fully grasped yet. The man on the phone looked up and saw all 3 of them on the 2nd level, and said something in Korean that Mary didn't catch. Then he looked directly at her. "Ms. Richardson." His English was clean, accented, precise. "We don't have a quarrel with you, we never did. You got pulled into something that wasn't your business, and we respect that you've handled yourself. So here's what we're offering. Walk out of this building. Right now. Leave Hongji-yong. Leave the equipment. Walk out and your brother stays safe. We'll even get you out of the country tonight. New life, clean." Silence. "Your brother made a business decision," the man continued, not unkindly. "This is just the cost of that decision resolving itself. It doesn't have to cost you anything." Mary looked at Ji-yong. He was looking back at her with that flat, controlled expression, the one she'd learned to read now, the one that meant he was preparing for an outcome he'd already accepted. And underneath it was something she recognized from the subway station, from every quiet moment in every hideout they'd passed through. He wasn't going to ask her to stay. He would never ask that. "My brother made his choice," Mary said, turning back to the man at the door. "I'm making mine." The man sighed like someone who'd expected this answer and was disappointed anyway. Then he nodded at the two people behind him. Ji-yong moved. What happened next was loud and fast, and not something Mary could narrate in real time even if she wanted to. Ji-yong and the two operatives collided in the kind of violence that clears your head of everything except survival. Mary grabbed Danny, pulled her toward the stairs to the third level, and they ran. The server terminal was exactly where Danny had said, a full rack system against the north wall, running hot with a standalone hard drive array bolted to the base. Danny sat down and started working immediately, her hands moving across the keyboard with the same focused chaos she brought to everything. "How long?" Mary asked. 2 minutes for a full wipe, 1 if I cut corners." "Cut corners? On a bioweapon database, sure. No notes." Below them, the sounds of the fight were moving, which meant Ji-yong was controlling it, redirecting it, keeping it away from the stairs. Addie's Mary stood at the top of the stairwell with the utility knife in her hand and tried not to think about what she'd do if someone came up. 50 seconds in, Danny said, "Got it. Wiping now." 30 seconds after that, "Done. The specs are gone. But the physical hardware..." Mary picked up the nearest piece of loose equipment, a metal bracket, heavy, industrial, and put it through the hard drive array. Once, twice, and a third time until the casing cracked and the components scattered across the floor. "Okay," Danny said. "Yeah, that works." Ji-yong appeared at the top of the stairs. He was breathing hard. There was blood on his collar. Not his, she checked immediately, not his. He looked at the destroyed hardware on the floor, then at Mary. "It's done?" "It's done. The specs are wiped. The 6 rings they'd already distributed are still out there. But they can't make more." Something moved across his face. Not relief exactly, more like the specific exhaustion of a man who'd been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and had just been allowed to set it down. "The antidote," he said. "They'd keep it here, on site, in case the ring was ever accidentally triggered on the wrong person. They found it in a locked case on the same level, a clinical-grade injector, labeled in both Korean and English, designed for exactly this scenario. Ji-yong administered it himself, the way someone does when they've been a long time without control over their own body and are quietly, deeply grateful to have it back. They had maybe 12 minutes before the situation became uncontainable. Sirens in the distance, multiple directions, and not just police. Ji-yong had recognized one of the operatives downstairs as connected to a rival faction, which meant word had already spread that the syndicate's leadership was compromised, and other players were moving in to claim the vacuum. The four of them stood in the street outside the warehouse, Mary, Ji-young, Danny, and the night air, and ran the math together. Danny could disappear. She had a cousin in Busan, no digital trail, she'd be fine. Ji-young handed her a burner card with enough cash loaded on it to not ask questions for a while. She looked at Mary for a long moment. Ji then pulled her into a hug that lasted exactly long enough to say everything neither of them had words for. Then she left. 3. Mary turned to Ji-young. He was already looking at her, and she could see it. The thing he'd already decided, probably somewhere between the third level and the street, probably somewhere between the antidote and the sirens. "No," she said. "Mary—" I said no. Don't do the thing where you've already made the decision and you're just telling me now. The rival factions are going to come after you as long as I'm next to you. You're a loose end to 4 different organizations right now. The only way you stop being a loose end is if I'm not a variable anymore. There are other ways. There aren't. Not fast enough. He paused. Federal custody is the only place none of them can reach me. And the only place they stop looking for you. The sirens were getting closer. You'd give up everything, Mary said. I already lost most of it. 12 years of loyalty and a building full of men who stood around waiting for me to die. He looked at her steadily. What I'm choosing to do right now is the first clean decision I've made in a long time. Let me make it. Mary didn't cry. She wasn't built for that kind of display, but she felt something shift in her chest, something permanent, like a scar forming in real time. When they ask how you were found, anonymous tip, completely unrelated civilian. The corner of his mouth moved, just barely. You were never here. She looked at him for a long moment. This man she'd met dying in a garden. This man who'd drunk an electrolyte packet because she told him to. This man who'd stepped in front of a hit squad for her without discussion or hesitation. You're not as terrible as your reputation, she said. Don't spread that around. She almost smiled. Almost. Then she turned, slipped into the utility corridor she'd found 8 months ago on a bored Saturday that she now understood had been preparation for exactly this. And she walked. Behind her, she heard Ji-young's voice, calm, clear in Korean, giving his location to what she could only assume was a federal line. She didn't look back. You know that thing I said earlier about Mary never looking back when things explode? She kept that same energy all the way to the end. Here's what this story was actually about, underneath all of it. There's a documented principle in both survival research and organizational psychology that says the most dangerous threats in any system are never the ones from outside. They're the ones that develop internally, slowly, quietly, while trust is being built in the wrong direction. Ji-young's empire fell because he confused loyalty with longevity. He assumed that 12 years meant something permanent. But time without accountability isn't loyalty. It's just waiting. And Mary? Mary's entire arc was built around one flaw, the inability to walk past someone who needed help, even when helping cost her everything. Researchers actually call this compulsive altruism, and while the world tends to romanticize it, the truth is more complicated. The savior instinct, when it's not paired with boundaries, doesn't just put you at risk. It puts the people you love at risk, too. Danny got taken because Mary made a phone call. The lesson isn't don't help people. The lesson is trust is earned in details, not in time. And the most important person to protect is sometimes the one standing right next to you. Ji-young learned that a stranger was worth more than 12 years of hierarchy. Mary learned that some problems you can't outrun. You have to stand in them and choose. Both of them walked out of this story different. One of them walked out free. Look, If this story hit different for you, if you found yourself actually thinking about who you'd trust in a ticking clock situation, or whether you'd have turned that corner and kept walking, that's the conversation I want to have with you. Drop in the comments. What was the moment this story turned for you? Was it Mary cutting the ring? Ji Yong stepping in front of that hit squad? Or was it the ending? A man choosing accountability over freedom? I read every single comment. No cap. And if you're not subscribed yet, look, you sat through this whole story, you clearly have taste, so just hit subscribe and come back for the next one. I promise it goes just as hard. Like this video, if Mary Richardson deserves her flowers. She earned them. Let's go.